Native American cultures have a wide range of spiritual systems and religious beliefs. None of the Native American cultures have ever referred to their traditional healers, ritualists, singers, mystics, lore keepers, and medicine people as shamans. There were two classes of mediators between the world of spirits and the world of men: the priests, who performed some function for the tribe or country, and the shamans, whose power was totally based on their own abilities. According to different explanations, the shaman is a Persian word that means pagan, or, more likely, the Tungus, East Siberian nomadic Mongoloid people, equivalent for medicine man. It was first used to refer to medicine men or exorcists in Siberian tribes, and it was later expanded to include similar people among American Indian tribes. Shamans carried out almost every religious role, including that of a doctor among the Haida and Tlingit tribes. Sometimes a shaman served as a town or house chief, bringing together religious and civil authority. Though some shamans became such due to their inherent fitness, in general, he inherited his position from an uncle, passing on his spiritual assistance in the same way that he might his material wealth. Either way, the man's initial indication of his new power came when he became irrationally ill and stayed that way for a while. However, in other parts of North America, the sweat bath was a crucial tool for creating the right mental state, and some people developed into shamans after escaping a lightning strike or a wild animal's jaws. A Northwest Coast shaman was believed to be possessed by a supernatural being whose name he bore and whose attire he mimicked when performing or treating a patient. This spirit was frequently bolstered by a number of lesser spirits that were depicted on the shaman's mask, enhancing his vision, sense of smell, and other senses among the Tlingit. He never trimmed or styled his hair, instead letting it grow long. When he performed, he ran quickly around the fire toward the sun, while his friends beat on narrow pieces of board and sang spirit songs, and his assistant pounded on a wooden drum. Then the spirit showed him what he was trying to discover: the location of a whale or other food animal, the approach of an enemy, or the cause of a patient's sickness. In the latter case, he removed the object causing pain by blowing upon the affected part, sticking at it, or rubbing a charm. If the soul had wandered, he captured and restored it, and in case the patient had been bewitched, he revealed the offender's name and directed how he was to be handled. Payment for his services was always made in advance, but in case of failure, it was usually returned, while among some tribes, failure was punished with death. Shamans also performed sleight-of-hand feats to show their power, and two shamans among hostile people would fight each other through the air through their spirits. Although these and other American tribes' shamanic practices shared similar concepts, they differed greatly in their forms. While Chitimacha shamans consulted their assistants in trances, Iroquois shamans and likely others controlled their spirits objectively, as if they were handling numerous instruments, rather than being possessed. There were two classes of shamans among the Nootka: the Kokotsma, or soul workers, who were hired to reunite a wandering soul with its body, and the Uktaku, or workers, who healed a person when illness was thrown upon him by an enemy, or when it entered in the form of an insect. There were two different kinds of shamans among the Songhees people of Vancouver Island's southernmost tip. The higher of these, the Skuneum, obtained his power through sexual relations with supernatural beings, as is customary. Simultaneously, the Sioa, who was typically a woman, learned from another Sioa, while the latter's role was to placate hostile powers, to whom she spoke a sacred language. The former more closely resembled the common type of shaman. She was also used for various charms and by women who wanted to have children. The initiation of shamans and warriors among the Salish appears to have occurred similarly, through animals that served as the guardian spirits for the novices. In their larger-than-other lodges in the camp, Kootenai shamans would pray and call upon the spirits. The Hoopa of California identified two types of shamans: other shamans who, after identifying the problem, eliminated it by sucking, and dancing shamans who identified the cause of illness and the steps required for recovery. Mojave shamans typically obtain their abilities through dreaming rather than the more conventional means of fasting, seclusion, petitioning, etc., and receive them directly from Mastamho, the chief deity. The Shasta also have this latter trait. There appear to have been significant differences among the Maidu in a relatively small area. In the northeastern region of the Maidu country, all of a shaman's children were required to follow in his footsteps or face death from the spirits. In other regions, heredity had little bearing on who should become a shaman. There were two sorts of shamans: the shaman proper, whose functions were mainly curative, and the dreamer, who communicated with spirits and the ghosts of the dead. All shamans were also dreamers, but not the reverse. During the winter months, the dreamers held meetings in darkened houses where they spoke with the spirits, much like modern spirit mediums. At other times, the shamans of the foothill region met to see which was most powerful and danced until all but one had dropped out. One who had not had a shaman for a parent had to go into the mountains to a place where some spirit was supposed to reside, fast, and go through certain ceremonies, and when a shaman desired to obtain more powerful helpers than those he possessed, Lai did the same. Shamans in this region always carried cocoon rattles. In addition to the herbalist or doctor, as they are properly called, historians list three classes of shamans among the Chippewa. These were the Jesakid, who were prophets and seers who drew their strength from the thunder god, the Wabeno, who used medical magic, and the Mid, who were concerned with the sacred society known as the Midewuwin, and ought to be considered priests instead. While there was a distinct class of diviners known as powwow, or dreamers, the latter were represented among the Delaware by the Meadow, who were particularly interested in healing. The central Eskimo spoke to their spirits while seated, in contrast to most shamans. Their main responsibility was to determine which taboos had been broken, which resulted in illness or storms. Priests had a national or tribal vocation, as opposed to an individual one, as was the case with shamans. His role might be less as a direct mediator between spirits and humans, and more as a leader in the ceremonies and custodian of the sacred myths if there were significant rituals. The roles of shaman and priest may occasionally be combined, as is the case among the Eskimo and on the northwest coast. It is frequently challenging to determine which term is correct, because authors have used them so interchangeably, particularly when referring to eastern tribes. Certain priestly roles tended to revolve around the village or tribal chief, even in areas where shamanism was most prevalent. Salish, the chief of the Fraser River coast, was even more of a high priest than a civil chief, leading his people in religious functions. This is evident among the Haida, Tlingit, Tsimshian, and Kwakiutl in the prominent role the chiefs played in secret society performances. Two classes of men that could be included in this category were found in the majority of Eastern Plains tribes. One of these classes included societies that focused on hearing and using specific remedies while simultaneously calling upon higher powers. In order to be admitted, a man had to complete a period of education. One of the few men who served as superior officers in the performance of national rites and passed on their knowledge to an equally small number of successors was included in the other. The priests of the Midewuwin ceremony among the Chippewa, Menominee, and other Algonquian tribes may have been comparable to these. Every Creek town had a high priest, according to some accounts. These individuals had a significant impact on the state, especially in the area of military affairs. They would predict drought or rain, feign to bring rain for amusement, heal illnesses, drive out witches, call forth or drive out evil spirits, and even take control of lightning and thunder. The head chief, also known as the Great Sun, was a direct descendant of the national lawgiver who emerged from the sun and served as the nation's ex officio high priest in the theocratic Natchez state. The remaining sons formed a sacred caste and shared their roles to a lesser extent. Doubtless, the most highly developed priesthood north of Mexico, however, was among the pueblos of New Mexico and Arizona, where they control the civil and military branches of the tribe. The rain priesthood was a body almost entirely composed of men whose duty was to bring plentiful rain supplies by secret prayers and fasts. The priesthood of the bow was really a war society, whose ceremonies were held to give thanks for abundant crops, or, after a scalp had been taken, to bring about rain through the pleasure that the taking of this scalp gave to the gods, the controllers of the rain. In Zuni, The court of the last appeal and the center of all authority are the two head priests of the bow and the rain priests of the 6 cardinal points. With the exception of the priest of the zenith, each of these had a number of assistants, and the female assistant of the priest of the north, who held the highest position, was known as the priestess of fecundity and had considerable power. These were followed by the esoteric societies and the Kodakili society. The former, which dealt directly with the gods and whose ceremonies were to bring rain, was open to all male Zuni and very rarely some female Zuni. However, the esoteric societies were mainly healing societies and dealt primarily with the zoic or beast gods. At the time of the ceremonies, they might send for one member or treat a patient. In order to bring rain, these societies also performed significant rituals. In contrast to the rain and war priests, the active members of these societies, such as the Kodakili, were referred to as thurgists, although their roles were more akin to those of priests than shamans.